Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our final installment for this academic year of our Benchmark Talk series. On today's topic will be fantastic. We've got a great group to talk about securing investment for your startup. The Benchmark Talk series is put together. It's co-sponsored by Biolocity, the Georgia CTSA, and the Pettit Institute for Bioengineering and Bioscience. My name is Courtney Law, and I'm Managing Director of Biolocity. And I just have a few intro slides before I turn it over to the panel. So we have a couple of resources that we want to share with you as a startup or as a member of the Emory Georgia Tech community. So one thing that we offer is legal office hours. So if you're interested in different topics around things like patent and prior art searches or NDAs or IP ownership, we are happy to help schedule a meeting with Professor Nicole Morris of the Emory School of Law. New to our ecosystem, we have a new program called Lab to Launch. It is not only an incubator space, but we'll have some programming around it. It is capital efficient space that will be housed at the at Emory's new facility in Health Science Research Building 2. If you're interested in learning more about this program, please feel free to reach out to Harry Gerard, who is leading that effort, and you can email him at labtolaunch@emory.edu. One additional thing I wanted to share is Biolocity is in partnership with the BARDA Drive Accelerator Network. BARDA has various areas of interest for both funding and partnership. I've listed the current areas of interest that are open. If you feel like your technology falls in any of these categories, or you're just interested in learning more about BARDA and the Drive Network, please reach out to my team. You can contact us through our website or just reach out to us at biolocity@godtech.edu, and we're happy to chat more about that program. Before I turn it over to Morgan, the moderator of today's panel, again, this is the last installment of this academic calendar year for Benchmark. So in the upcoming week, we'll probably be sending you a survey link alongside the recording of today's talk. Just want to hear about what you thought about this year's series, as well as any ideas that you have for next year. So please take the time to fill that out. And with that, I will turn it over to Morgan.
Awesome. Thanks, Courtney. Actually, if you don't mind just leaving that slide up for a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the intros. So welcome, everyone. We're going to have a panel discussion around early stage VC funding for your startup. And if you have questions, we're seeing the other version, Courtney, if you could flip it. If you have questions at all during the talk, feel free to put those in the chat to the panelists or to the Q&A, and we can ask those live. We're still seeing your
oh, really?
notes view.
Let me try one more thing. I'll reshare it. Thank you.
We'll make it work. Don't worry about it, Courtney. Oh, there you go. Perfect. So first, I'd love to have each of our panelists introduce themselves, say a little something about their firm, what stage company they invest in, and what kinds of technologies they're looking for. And we'll just go in order here on the slide. So starting with you, Justin.
Great, thanks, Morgan. Hi, everyone. Justin Burns. I'm with Morningside. We're a global life science investor. We have offices primarily in Boston, although we have teams in the UK and in Shanghai as well. I sit primarily on the life science investment team, where we invest in sort of new and paradigm shifting science. Our comfortable area is sort of in that Series C to call it early Series B. We write checks from $100,000 to $100 million. We are private, so we're not a typical VC in that we don't have limited partners. We really sort of prefer to build that scientific conviction around the technology and the team and let the deal work itself out. We've made investments really in anything that sort of, as we call it, bettering the human condition. So we've made investments in vaccines and therapeutics, drug discovery, diagnostics, devices. Our recent investment focus has been in digital health. I think the pandemic showed us, rapid acceleration and acceptance of new technologies and using technology to bridge the healthcare gap. So with that, my background, I'm a PhD trained actually at Georgia Tech, did both my degrees there in molecular and microbiology. After that, I left, did some research for the Navy in DC, came back and actually worked at Emory. So I have good ties to both universities. Worked at Emory both as a researcher and then left and joined Emory's Tech Transfer Office, where I sort of moved through the ranks and all the way from contracting as little as an MTA or NDA, all the way up through enterprise level data use and clinical trials. Left and joined Morningside about almost 3 years ago now. So here I wear a number of hats, have a couple of operator roles, as well as holding investor director board seats for companies where we lead investments.
And Todd still misses you, Justin.
I know, I hear all the
time. Awesome. Let's move to Lillian.
Hi, everyone. Very nice to be here. My name is Lily Mu. I'm a consultant for Bada Ventures. So I just have to first go through the disclosure that, everything I said or it's my view. It doesn't represent Bada or Bada Ventures. So I start with my background. I started as a scientist. I worked for different big pharma before I switched to VC and an investment bank before I joined to support Bada Ventures. So what is Bada Ventures? So I start with Bada. Bada is Biomedical Advanced Research Development Authority. We support advanced stage technology and innovation. So if it is therapeutics, it has to be phase 1 and above. If there's a medical device, it needs to be you need to have a working prototype at least to come to us and to get a contract. So it's all non-dilutive funding. But Bada Venture, on the other hand, I like to say that Bada Venture is a venture capital arm of Bada, and it is the one, the only and the first and only VC investment in technology from the government side. So what Bada Venture invests is, the way we do the investment is like we partner with Global Health Investment Corporation. They are our venture partner. And the reason that we do is that as a government agency, we are not allowed to take ownership in the company. So because of that, we partner with our investment partner, Global Health Investment Corporation, to do investment in innovative technology in medical countermeasures. So that's the one difference between us and others. Like we are very focused. Our area of interest is medical countermeasure. The technology that we invest in, it can be anything. You can have your first indication can be a oncology or anything else, but your technology have to have some part of your technology is able to support Bada mission related technology. So the fund itself. So Bada Venture, we are committed to provide our partner with up to 500 million fund in 10 years partnership. So far, we have given them over 100 million, close to 150 million, and they are responsible. Our partner is responsible to go out and raise one-to-one match. So potentially, it would be a $1 billion fund specifically focused on medical countermeasure. So the stage of investment is we invest and our partner invests is a stage agnostic. We don't have a stage that we typically focus in, but we like to see that it is a platform technology or enabler technologies to medical countermeasure. Our investment partner invests in C stage to Series D. The first and per round is $5 million per round, and we don't like to be more than 50% of the syndicate. We can lead or we can participate. So I think that's a summary of myself and my department.
That's great. Thanks, Lillian. I know Bada was pretty active during COVID, particularly I'm also part of the RADx program, so I know Bada was very active there. Let's move on to Connor.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Nice to spend some time with you this morning. Hopefully the panel will be helpful. So I work with the Georgia Research Alliance, also known as GRA, and its venture fund. The GRA is a collaboration between the state and private in companies, foundations. And our focus is on technologies that have been and inventions, discoveries that are coming out of the universities, the research universities here in Georgia. And so we help identify what we think we can develop into companies. So as a consequence, the stage at which we get involved is actually before the company is even formed. So the GRA has a grant program that's available to the universities and then through the universities to the individual researchers. So if any of you are thinking about starting a company, I'd encourage you to look into that. So the money goes directly to the lab. We don't pay overhead fees. We can get up to $150,000 of grants. We review the grants as they come in, so there's no deadline for them. And the focus of the grants is really to establish proof of concept and reduction to principle, so that as the project moves through the development and research and development pipeline, it'll get to a point where it could then apply for the loan program, which is designed intentionally friendly terms to a company that's been formed. The company would then license the technology from the university, and that's available to get companies started. And ultimately, the goal of the program is to position the various projects and companies to be able to raise venture capital at that point. And then I also work for the GRA Venture Fund, which is designed to support the projects that come through the GRA grant and loan program. So if you kind of think about it from a high level perspective, there's a spectrum of resources that are available to the various projects, depending on the stage and what they're trying to accomplish. And it's been a very effective program. My background, as you can see, I'm MBA, so I have finance background. We work with all the research universities here in Georgia, so we look at all different technologies, not just life sciences. Although I'd say that roughly 2/3 of our deal flow is life science oriented companies, but we also deal with companies that are not in the life science field. So it just depends what comes out of the universities. But I've been in the venture business for longer than I care to remember. The picture, my hair, I still had color in my hair. Now it's all gray. So that gives you a sense of how long I've been doing this. But anyway, that's a quick summary of the GRA and my background.
Well, thanks, Connor. And if folks do not know the GRA, it is a fantastic opportunity for non-dilutive funding in the state of Georgia. Very unique to the state of Georgia and something to take advantage of. Awesome. Let's move on to Giannina.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. It's great to be here. So my name is Giannina Varea. I'm with Portal Innovations, and we are a venture capital firm that invests in early stage startups in biotech and medtech. And our main thesis of investment is that we believe that there's great science and great technologies all over the country, not just on the coasts. And so we started in Chicago a couple of years ago, and we realized that to be able to invest in emerging biotech ecosystems in the US, we couldn't just like bring some of the capital or just write a check. We actually needed to also provide an entire infrastructure for those places to be able to not just invest on those companies, but keep those companies near to the universities, near to the founders, and then allow them to grow locally. So we did that in Chicago. We have 50,000 square feet of lab space fully equipped for companies that need that to get up and running once they come out of the universities. So we provide that as well. And then we also have a lot of people like myself that work very closely with the founders on strategy and helping them get ready for their next financing round, which is usually the Series A or Series B as we come in very early. As I said, we started here in Chicago, but now we are expanding. We're actually going to Atlanta. We already have a team down there that I'm sure maybe some of you have met already. And we are bringing the same model. So we're bringing the lab space, which is fully equipped. So again, you can just come in and start your experiment, bring your pipettes, and you should have at least 80% of all the equipment that you need right there. And it's very flexible. You can start with like one bench and then grow as you need. And we're going to be opening in Science Square in about less than a year now. So I'm not sure if some of you have seen the building that is kind of under construction right now. But we're going to be kind of replicating the model in Atlanta, and then we're going to different geographies as well as we keep expanding. We think that the model has been very successful so far because there's a lot of institutions like Georgia Tech or Emory and others that have great faculty and great innovators, but didn't really have the opportunity or the space to commercialize it and kind of have, again, the early stage capital, the lab space, and the know-how and people to help them put all that together. So we believe that by bringing those three currencies, we are also increasing the chances of the companies to being successful. So my background is in molecular biology and business. I've been 10 years in biotech, always in the early stages. My last company was Pyxis Oncology. I was there as the first employee. It's a company that came out of University of Chicago, but because we didn't have something like Portal back then, we had to move it to Boston. And I was going back and forth. And after going through, growing that company, going to an IPO and everything, I just decided to come back to Chicago. I mean, I never really left, but I just wanted to come back and do it all over again, this time right here. And Portal was kind of the perfect place to do that. We invest, as I said, biotech and medtech between $500,000 to 1.5. And we also help to bring some syndicate partners to the deal as well.
Awesome. It's been super exciting to see Portal. I've met with Shahila a few times, and it's been awesome to see Portal's entry into the Atlanta ecosystem. So welcome. And last but not least, we have Tien. Go ahead.
Hey everyone, thank you for having me here today. And so I'm Tien, I'm with Centogeny. So Centogeny, we're a biotech accelerator. At the same time, we also have a dedicated VC fund. So there are two main component of the funds. And the first part was the Centogeny portion, where we typically invest in seed stage company, check size ranging from a few $100,000 to a few $1 million. With that, what we really like to do is to work very closely with the company that we bring in as a partner. We typically meet with this company every week or every 2 weeks, just to help guide them toward the development process. I think this really come out from Chris Garabedian after he left Sarepta. What he found, when he realized that there's a lot of cool technology out there, where there's a lack of operational support. That's why he put a team of drug developers together to help shepherd these companies toward IIT. So while doing that, Chris and the Perceptive team, which is a hedge fund based in New York, they formed the Perceptive Centogeny Venture Fund, so just PXV for short. So for this fund, then we typically invest in Series A, Series B company, check size ranging from $10 to $40 million. With that, we want to get to that first in human proof of concept clinical data as a main value inflection point. So with both Centogeny and PXV, we're trying to provide a multi-stage investment thesis, so that we have a funding for company. If the science still work out great, we have money reserved for them to go through the process. And as a firm, we are indication agnostic, modality agnostic. I think about 2/3 of our investments focusing on therapeutics, and a third on medtech and devices and diagnostic. And for myself, I'm Tien. I'm a trained molecular neuroscientist that was in DC at the Georgetown and NIH program. And after that, I left, joined RA Capital, which is a biotech hedge fund based in Boston, for a year and a half. I focused on the CNS landscape before I realized I liked a lot of the earlier VC stage work, and joined Centogeny for about a little bit over a year now. So nice to meet everyone.
Awesome. Welcome. All right. Let's start with just a little bit of basics around everything that we're talking about here is taking companies out of academia. So typically faculty or postdocs or PhDs that are thinking about commercializing their technology. And I'd like to start with Lillian just to talk a little bit about the role of the academic PI when they're spinning out a technology from academia.
Happy to start the conversation on this topic. So I think I'm gonna a little talk about like I think like spinning out a company out of academia. I like to look at it as like a pre and then during and post. And you know, to do so is like the benefit of the success of the company and moving the technology to the next stage. So I look at it before you thinking about spinning out a company. I really highly recommend the academics, the faculty, whoever wants to spin it out, really do your diligence, whether the technology that you plan to spin out really is innovative, differentiated, and also the most importantly, whether there's a market need for it. I like to say that all the research are really important. No matter how small or how great it is, but not every innovation or any science doesn't make it, they don't make a good business. So if you're starting a company, it is a business, it's not a science project. So you really need to do your diligence on what your technology is, what your company technology is based on, who's going to do it, how you're going to do it, and how you're going to move forward. And that, that's the first thing that you need to think about. And if you're thinking about spinning out a company, you really need to start talking to people who have done it, people, organization like Biologity, and your local and regional entrepreneur community, where they can provide a lot of support and a lot of help. In giving you the idea how to do it, how to start it, where to find different resources. So, for example, like when I was working with faculty and students with Yale, Yale has a really good entrepreneurship support system. They would match with the PI with the a student who is a graduate student. Study to become in a business school. They will mesh together science focused person and then business focused person. They mesh them together and they train them. They have entrepreneurship program that you can apply for, a fellowship, different fellowship program that you can apply for. They help to scoop out the business plan for the science project that you are looking to spin out. So it's really important to connect with those organizations, those groups, and support resources to understand how you're going to do it. And then during the time is that you really need to start working with tech transfer. The most important with tech transfer is you really need to. Sometimes it can take a long time, but I know that a lot of university now started to utilize preset terms that they would say, this is the term that, this I have, there is no very little negotiation. But with that, the process is much smoother and much faster. And you really need to think about what terms that you really like for that you want to negotiate. So that's the important, that's the second important thing during your spin out. And a lot of companies or a lot of universities now allow their PIs to take a sabbatical. So that's another important thing. When you are focusing on spin out a company, you really need to put in at least 80%, 90% of your time in your company, because you no longer a PI for the university, you are spinning out a company. If you are the main person that behind the company. So a lot of universities now provide sabbatical leave to their PI so that the PI can really focus on on the company that they are spinning out. And once you spin it out, now you really need to find capital, how to move your technology forward. So there's a lot of non-dilutive funding opportunities because initially your startup's going to survive on non-dilutive funding. Your technology is not at a stage that VC will come in and put their money in. So you really need to find usually state and federal and local, like I said, regional, local, state and federal resources, SDBR, STTR, and also all the non-dilutive grants like NIH, DARPA, and now the latest is like ARPA-H. They have a lot of federal government has a lot of support to innovation, research and innovation in not just in academia, small businesses, small companies, biotech. So you really need to do your research, do your diligence to spin it out company. So I hope I answered some of the questions, and it's not just on a PI, but in general, in spinning out technology out of academics.
Awesome. Thanks, Lillian. I wonder if I could ask Justin and Connor just to comment a little bit about the role of tech transfer in connecting folks to outside funding.
Sure.
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in quickly. So I think tech transfer is a great opportunity. The tech transfer network is extensive. Lots of offices around the country. There's a professional organization. That network certainly has ties into external funding. People like Connor that are at GRA and similar other agencies around the country. To external VCs, I think you have a good selection of panelists here who have the network as well. Myself coming from tech transfer, obviously now I have both networks. So I think leverage that as much as you can. Tech transfer can certainly make the introduction, but I think the VC arms work a little bit differently than tech transfer. Licensing and company formation is different than financing. And so as long as the introduction can be made, a warm intro is always better than, a cold email to a VC firm.
Yeah, and I would just to follow up, Justin, I totally agree with you. The intro is key, and those transfer offices do have a lot of resources that are readily available to you if you know who to ask. And so, just a quick example for the GRA and our grant program and grant and loan program that comes through the Office of Technology Transfer through Todd's groups. So when you disclose what you're working on to Todd, it's usually someone in his office that then makes the connection between what you're doing and the GRA to then apply for funding and go through that process. So they're a terrific resource. They frequently will host VCs that are in town, and they'll kind of line up a bunch of projects that they think would fit their investment strategy. And so that's another good way to meet potential investors.
And especially at Georgia Tech, there's offices like Venture Lab, so not necessarily in the tech licensing office, but other opportunities. And Emory has a similar function in the faculty and startup services, which sits in tech transfer. But Venture Lab is a unique entity at Tech, I think.
Yeah, Justin, thank you for mentioning that, because that's actually who the Venture Lab is, the source of the applicants for GRA at Tech. So depending on the university, it's a different could be a different source, but in any event, each university has something similar to that role and function that's available to you.
Yep. I would love to actually key off something you said, Justin, and go to you, actually, Connor, about when to reach out to investors. So when is that right time? How do you go about that? You talked a little bit about a warm intro, but how should academic PIs think about when to reach out to investors?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And there's, it's a little bit, you might get a different answer depending on who you ask. So at the GRA, the earlier the better. We like to get to know people early. We like to see what they're working on. We like to try and help fund experiments that'll really differentiate whether the technology they're working on, has merit, and is something that you could build a company around. There's also the school of thought, though, that you're only new once. So when you approach a VC, Some VCs are more willing to give you advice and perspective at an earlier stage. I think the folks on this panel are probably fall into that category. But I do know of other VCs, you're only new once, and if you're too early for them, then they may kind of blow you off. And then when you go back to them, they kind of think, oh, well, you're an old story. I've already seen you. It doesn't have the same impact. So you kind of have to know who the audience is and who you're talking to, what the firm is, what stage they like to invest at. But certainly, I think at the GRA, we like to get involved at a very, very early stage. And most VCs, I think, are willing to talk about, if they're not willing to invest in you at the current stage, they are willing to give you advice about what they need to see you accomplish before they would consider an investment. And that can then help guide you. The one advantage of talking to a potential VC at an early stage is you kind of get to interview them and get to know them as well as they get to know you, so that when the time comes for an investment, you have a sense of who they are and whether this is a person you really want to work with. So there are advantages to getting in early, but there's no, I wouldn't say there's a right and a wrong, and there's no easy answer. It's really a function of your stage and who you're talking to.
I would add that I agree with Connor. Like this, the earlier the better. If academics or a company startup come to us and they have some technology, sometimes even though it's early, we would tell them we would get them to provide feedback on like where they need to be to come and talk to us again. So but one thing that I would highly recommend is like to also do your diligence on the VC that you are going to be talking to. Right, I have seen, even though our fund is focused on medical countermeasure, there's so many people reach out to us that are not in medical countermeasures. So when somebody reach out to me with the technology that's not related to our mission space, now I know that they haven't done their diligence. So and so you really need to reach out to like what stage they invest in, what space they invest in, what is the amount that they invest in. That it would be good to do your diligence before you talk to VC.
I know most of you all are focused pretty early stage, but maybe a Portal and Morningside, or maybe slightly later. I don't know if Gianna or Justin, you want to comment on that?
I would consider ourselves still very early. So we do seed and Series A. That's kind of like the latest. So I think probably Justin can bring more nuances to the later stages.
Yeah, we're pretty broad. We again sort of look at the science first, and we're happy to see things and build a relationship with a PI, especially if it's an area of interest for us. We're happy to sponsor research and form a company. We're also happy to participate if a company is in their last money in before going public. We do like to be early. It's always better to take some scientific risk rather than financial. We can attribute most of the equity we have in now public companies to our Series A investment. We tend to stay with companies long term, but again, we're private, so we have a lot of flexibility there. I don't think there's a wrong time to reach out. I do think I agree with Lily and sort of make sure your scope is accurate. If you know that a VC is not interested in a space, it won't do you much good to reach out. And we consider that when people reach out to us with things that are just not within our investment scope. We do a lot of things, but we don't do more things that are on the squarely tech side, for instance. And so if they're reaching out to us for that, we'll politely pass.
Okay, great. An important part of a VC process, or even incubator process, is due diligence. And I was hoping to turn to you, Tien, to talk a little bit about the due diligence process and maybe give everyone a little intro of what that looks like.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I think probably like almost everyone here, for us is really to dive into the sciences is like the first and foremost and most important aspect of the due diligence. With that, just try to get into understanding the biology impact of the technology. Is it make biological sense? And that's where we spend the bulk of our time really trying to understand that aspect for that, from talking to KOLs, digging through the papers and whatnot, and trying to really try to understand the technology and the impact it will have. And even beyond these, when we get past the scientific diligence, then we'll start thinking about the unmet need, start diving into the competition space. I think that a lot of companies kind of don't glaze over the competitive aspect of other companies out there, and that they're kind of missing that during the due diligence process. And we typically also looking at that and make sure that the company are prepared, ready for all of those questions when we have them. And then beyond the scientific diligence, competition aspect of it, the population aspect, we start thinking about the financial need of the company. Is if they have a clear plan for the clinical pathway, and also thinking if they have that business center thinking about what needed to the next raise for to get to that next value inflection point. So sometimes company doesn't start thinking about that, did raise the money to get to that IND, but then they kind of did not have a preparedness for thinking about what the next step would be to get to that next value inflection point. That would be Series A, Series B, and if it would be a creative company can also start thinking about that and also prepare for that to really know when to get to that first in human clinical data, how much money would you really need, and that would then pay into how much you need to raise. Is the budget you have appropriate? I think all of the questions will be all compound together in the diligence process. So spanning scientific at the forefront, and then thinking all of the other steps as well during the diligence process.
I would like to add that for us, it's also very important the team. So there's actually diligence on the team itself, and that doesn't really mean like we're going to do a background check or anything like that. It's more like we're investing in a company. In our case, we're going to be living with you in our space. We like to say like we live with our investments, which is something that is very kind of unique about us, because we're going to work with you very closely. And so I would say that we want to see a team that works well together, that has the experience, that they need to really execute on this. And I think we've all seen great technologies that sometimes fail because they don't have the right team in place. So I think that that's a very, very important aspect as well. And I think sometimes people have put it to me like, dating, like, usually you don't, get to marry someone right away, right? So when you're kind of building a relationship with an entrepreneur, you're also getting to know that person, beyond just the company, but really how it's going to be to work with this person for the next, several years, right? So you want to make sure that there's a good fit on that aspect as well.
I completely agree. I always said that it's doing diligence between VC and the biotech or company it's a dating process. You date for a few years, and sometimes it could take a year, sometimes it could take a few months, and then once that everything is good, then you say, okay, I'm gonna sign an agreement with you and support you and for the next 7 years, 10 years, and then everything works out, then both of you stay happily hopefully not stay happily ever after, because you at one point you want the IPO and you want an acquisition to get your investment back. But at the same time, sometimes it doesn't work out. The best thing you can hope for is like, you go your own ways, very, peacefully. And you have seen like so many, there's sometimes, the breakup wasn't good, and everybody was unhappy. So yes, I agree that you really need to look for the team from the get-go.
Yeah, and to loop that into like the previous question, when you think about when to reach out, I think that's an important aspect. You reach out early, you start developing that relationship early. If it's not ready for the seed state at the moment, there's an opportunity for the Series A and Series B, even beyond that. So it's important to build a long-lasting relationship with company. And I think most of it are scientists. It's great to talk about scientists too. It's always fun to talk to an early stage company.
Lillian, I think you, in a backhanded way, advocated for divorce there somehow. That's excellent. One thing that you said, Tian, kind of sparked an idea. You talked about competition and people coming to you not having a good sort of knowledge of the competition in the landscape. Are there any other red flags that you see when you're doing due diligence that make you pause in the due diligence process?
Yeah, I mean, like on that competition, I think if you come with like just using pain for indication like NAF 147, we all know people have tried that. The company come in and without a good understanding of there's a multiple failure in this space. I think that would be a really red flag in the pause there. That's just a lack of understanding it or knowledge in the space that they are pitching for the idea. So I think be very thorough would be very helpful. And if, on that, and I think that if a modality have been failed in the past, so I think that's when you're really trying to differentiate yourself from all the other companies out there that work on the similar assets.
Yeah, that's a really good point about competition is not just people who are succeeding, it's people who have failed before and how you're different.
You know, Morgan, can I take a second and interject and come back to the team? Because I think, you know, from the GRA perspective, one of our biggest challenges, and I think it's probably shared by the other panelists here as well, is finding the business person to, in effect, to follow the the metaphor, to marry with the scientist, right? Because we don't expect a tenured professor to leave their position and all of a sudden become business people. You know, think about it. You want people to focus on the value add, right? And so, if the way to rapidly build enterprise value in any kind of startup is for the scientists to stay focused in the science, that's what's going to differentiate the project. So you want somebody else that can be out there and deal with kind of the business aspects of it. So that kind of gets back to who can you find that you want to work with very closely, a lot of hours and a lot of intention and intensity that can help you build the company. So, you know, it gets back to talking to folks early, because folks at Biolocity, folks like Justin, folks like Portal, they may have a network of folks that they could introduce to you that might become your business partner. So it all kind of holds together.
Really good point. Once you've gone through due diligence, it is time for negotiation and valuation. So I want to turn to Giannina to talk a little bit about the role of the lead investor, and talk a little bit about that process of valuation and negotiation.
Yeah, sure. So I think this is actually a very complex topic. I'm just going to try to like summarize it in a couple of minutes here. But yeah, finding your lead investor is really what is going to catalyze the financing round. And what we call a lead investor is usually the, VC that is coming in usually with the biggest check. That's one aspect. That's not always the case, but most cases, I would say that that's kind of, what people quickly think about a lead investor. But actually a lead investor has way more roles within a financing round. So they are the ones that negotiate the terms with the company. So what is called the term sheet, right? So a lead investor needs to negotiate with the team and try to, consolidate something that really works for both parties, for the company and for the investors, right? That's one thing. They're usually the ones that spend most of the time on the diligence side, as well as with the team. So they get to really get to know the team and the science very deeply. That doesn't mean that the other investors are not going to want to really get to know you, but I think the lead investor is the one that is spending most of the time and the resources on the diligence process. And then as part of the terms, right, evaluation, that's, there's many ways on how you can evaluate a company. We've heard from like business school and stuff like DCF and things like that. For biotech, it's kind of very different, right? You need like to compare with other companies sometimes, like at the same stage or in the same indication, like what have been the historical evaluations. And there are many other ways to like come up with that number. I don't know if you want to kind of go down, rabbit hole a little bit. But coming back to the lead investor, I think it's also the role of the person that is going to be orchestrating a lot of the financing round. So bringing some of the syndicate partners as well, right? So that group probably already has a lot of people that they work together and they like working together with. So they'll bring probably other investors that are going to fill up that round. So really it's kind of like your best friend at that point, because once you get to hopefully terms that work for both sides, then they're gonna bring other people that are gonna kind of complete that round. And I think that's kind of like the main aspects. Usually it's the party that you're spending most time with, and the ones that can guide and like provide some guidance as well and support. Yeah, I don't know if anyone has anything else to add to that, but I think that's kind of what I've seen from the leads.
Yeah, what I would add to it is I'll just tell you the advice that I give to our CEOs, because first of all, if an investor asks you about valuation, that's a good sign. They wouldn't normally ask if they're not at all interested. So if they're asking, that's a good sign. But what the advice I give to my CEOs is that if you've done your research on the investor you're talking to, then basically don't answer the question. Play with their ego. There's a lot of money out there that's just money. You want smart money. So I always tell them the response is, listen, you're in the business, roughly what the business is valued at. I'm looking for someone that can really help me build this business, add a lot of value. I think you're that person. I'll be reasonable with the valuation if you're reasonable with me. We can work that out. I'm not worried about that. I really want you to be part of this company. And that's the approach I like to take and see how they respond. Again, you need to know who the investor is, and you need to be pretty confident that they can add value. But play to their ego a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree with Connor. I think finding the right partner to add that value added, either be on the board or observe a board, just be giving them advice for the company build and whatnot is almost as valuable as the money that they bring in.
And also the one thing I'd add to it is I've been in meetings where this, I've given that advice. The CEO still gives a number, and it's a ridiculous valuation number. And the signal that sends to a potential investor is that the entrepreneur doesn't know what they're doing. They have no idea what their company is worth, and they're probably not going to be reasonable. So when it comes to negotiating the terms, so why bother? It just, you don't want to be completely, have a valuation that's completely out of range. And the flip side is you don't want to be so low that you're giving away a big chunk of your company unnecessarily, because it is dilutive capital. And getting back to something that Janina said, there's kind of two parts to the negotiation. One is the valuation itself, and that has to do with the economics behind the business, right? But there's also what I like to refer to as the command and control provisions. And I have seen VCs come in and provide a very high valuation. They invest a little bit of money, but the command and control provisions are such that they're basically taking over the company right from the get-go for very little capital. And so you have to kind of beware of that as well. Like the command and control gets into, who is making the decisions in the future about the strategy, when can the money be raised, that sort of thing. So there's kind of two pieces that you have to balance when you're negotiating with any investor.
I'll add to this, like from our side, or my experience, or I tend to ask, I tend to ask questions about the evaluation, just to see where, where they think that the evaluation is. But typically is like for early stage, like C, C or Series A, where you haven't raised a large equity round. Is that whatever I like to say that whatever the founder thinks the evaluation is, the VC will come back with at least half to cut it in half. So if you think like your valuation is 10, the VC thing is 5. If it is 5, sometimes they come back at 3. So and then you work together during the negotiation. You work together to come to a number that you are both happy with. So it's at the early round, it doesn't really matter what the founder thinks, what the CEO thinks of the biotech. It's a negotiation between like the VC and the founders. So don't expect too much, and also but don't undersell yourself.
Maybe one final comment there is if you've taken any sort of convertible debt, early stage companies like to use debt to get some money into the company early. Those convertible debt instruments can often include a cap or a discount rate to the next round. That can provide some information, at least to whoever gave you that debt, is how they're valuing the company, right? So those caps, sort of give you some insight. So if you have a convertible cap, and this is a whole separate hour-long discussion, the VCs can use that to sort of either drive down or think about how they're thinking about valuation, because exceeding that cap means people are getting free equity. And so we want to make sure, as we're making the investment, that ours is, we're getting our fair shake as the investor.
Good point. I want to wrap up kind of this topic with something that you mentioned, Connor, which is around board seats. And I want to turn to you, Justin, to talk a little bit, since you, I think you said in your intro, you sit on a few boards. So maybe you could talk a little bit about when an investor gets a board, how many seats, how does it work? Give a little intro to that topic.
Yeah, sure. So we think of a board of directors, you see public companies that have 13, 14 members on their board of directors. They're executives from other, publicly traded companies. We're not at that stage, but there is value in having a sort of oversight, to the company. Often in early stage, the scientist is still around the table and making decisions. And so typically with an equity investment, it's a good best practice to establish a board of directors, and they are not there to sort of be the day-to-day decision makers, but there to sort of provide guidance and ideally be a resource to the company. For Morningside, when we lead an investment, we typically ask for a board seat. It's usually there to both protect the investment, and it's also there to provide guidance, resource, whatever we can do to help the company as it moves forward. I'd say, at least in our mind, best practice is to always have an odd number on your board. You don't want to have voting members of the board be sort of deadlocked 2 to 2. At seed stage companies, a board is maybe 3 members. As you move to Series A, Series B, it's 5 or 7. Typically an investor or multiple investors, if they're writing a large enough check, will get at least a board seat. They may also be able to invite an observer. Usually at a seed stage, we still have the company CEO or maybe even the scientific founder as a board representative, knowing that what their input is will really help guide the company through those early stages. Board members come and go as the company grows and expands. It's reasonable to think that the founding scientists may step off, getting some insight from industry, expertise, other executives or other players in the field. As the board grows as well, it's also advisable to have what we call an independent seat. This is someone who doesn't have an affiliation either to the investor or to the company, and can sort of serve as a de facto tiebreaker if need be, in voting on decisions for the company about raising new money or direction for the company, and really evaluating everything on the merits. So yeah, it's flexible. Again, I think odd numbers are always preferable. The lead investor typically will get a board seat. If there's another major investor, depending on the number of seats, you can have them take a seat as well. It's also common to be able to appoint an observer or to have at least some information rights, as a major investor, even if they're not, present at the board meetings.
Yeah,
Awesome.
For us, we almost always take the board seat, either for observer or for director. Just because we are very mission focused, and we want the company that we invest in to focus on our mission. They can do other, they can develop in their pipeline. They can go ahead and develop other technologies, but we also want them to focus on technology that support our mission. So we always take the board seat to make sure that our mission target is accomplished.
Awesome. So we do have a couple questions that have come in the last 4 minutes here. And I want to come back to our lovely dating marriage analogy, which is Todd Solchek is asking about the dating stage. Can you comment on how to help transition an interest by investor to an actual commitment? I don't know if anyone wants to take that.
I'll jump in first. Interest from an investor, I would do your homework again on the investor. I think it's to everyone's point, make sure the investor is in the space. What you don't want is someone wasting your time. We try to be good about, passing politely if it's not a fit, and do so in a timely fashion. I would say there's also plenty of investors out there who take calls simply for competitive intelligence. And so they may have companies in the space. So again, do your homework. It's really important. If there's interest, I suspect the investor will follow up to you. I think a polite follow-up, if you haven't heard, is fine. But at the same time, my inbox overflows almost daily. So it's not out of this world to sort of politely ping or ask for some follow-up or just ask for, best next steps. Getting that interest, it's going to have to be a good fit, just given the number of opportunities we see all the time.
Yeah, and Justin, just to follow up on that, I think that's a good point. Yeah, I don't mind when folks follow up with me because my inbox does overflow, and so that's fine to do that. But I would say, you think about the process. You have the initial outreach, right? And it's okay to ask, what's the next step, right? If you're having a conversation, but you have the initial outreach. Hopefully, that leads to a meeting, and you can provide your pitch. And hopefully that leads to diligence. And hopefully the diligence leads to a term sheet, negotiated term sheet, and then ultimately a closing. So there's kind of several steps along the way. And getting back to the process, if you think about the resources that a venture fund has or any given partner, it's really kind of time and money. And so depending, and you've heard that, Justin and Leland say, they serve on boards or to take board seats. So that takes a lot of time as well. So sometimes there's just a capacity issue that, you've got so much going on, you don't have time to immediately respond. So don't get discouraged if you don't get a response right away. Sometimes it takes a little while. But I suspect my fellow panelists do the same thing I do, which is that there's a deal that really intrigues me. I will I keep a short list and I will follow up.
I would say also coming out of the gate and asking to sign an NDA is not advisable. You're not going to convert a lot of people. We all see so many things. We're not willing to sign that. At least we're not. I suspect it's true for most investors. We understand the science. We understand some of those things. We've got to be able to talk about it non-confidentially. So converting an investor interest, to real diligence, the first step is not to say, I'm not going to talk to you about what's going on without an NDA. It's just too early for us. We're just going to pass.
And I'll follow up with that. There's a balance between following up and pestering. So if somebody, if I like if people follow up with me. I always recommend because the way we do our conduct meeting is that we always have a pre-meeting before. I always recommend companies, to when you make a presentation, don't spend the whole hours or half an hour, whatever the amount, don't spend on your presentation. Always leave 5-10 minutes so that you can ask questions, and always end with what is the next step for the investor. Can I follow up with you 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, and do follow up? But then if you are following up every single week, then it really turns the investor off. And whatever, even if they're not interested in this, your technology, maybe the next time when you have another technology, they might be interested. So it's really, even they say no, it's really good to have keep in touch, keep in contact, and build relationship with VC, anybody who can help who can help your company. So I always say never burn bridges. Don't get on people's nerves. That's my advice to anybody. Yeah.
Cool. We're at 12:30 and we're going to do something a little goofy. Last question is about the environment of investing and whether it's sort of going up or down for biotech companies. So can I get a Roman vote? Is it going up or down for biotech companies from your perspective?
I think it's going up.
Sideways, up?
Sideways,
Oh,
slowly.
Generally positive is the answer. All right. Cool. Well, thank you so much, panelists. Really appreciated the conversation, and thank you, everyone. We will have a recording of this afterward, and we'll send that out to if you registered. So thank you so much. Have a good day.